How you doing, everybody? It's Wardy here, and we have so much to break down our latest Big Mets update segment, that being April 14th, 2025, dropping the AM like it usually does, and I'm recording this per-usual the night prior after, yes, the latest series victory as the Amazons took down the Sacramento Athletics by a final score of 8-0. I'm going to further expand on my thoughts beyond our post-game show that many of you guys saw this past night. Make sure you do so as we broke down the ballgame inning by inning and all the key takeaways, but we're going to further break down the dominance that was Kodai Senga, and I'm going to do that with my great friend Isaac Groffman, who has some key notes to share on Senga's front and what worked so well for him in his latest outing here against the A's. We're also going to get into both the highs and the lows for the Mets 2.5 weeks in the season there at a 10-5 record. What's working, what's not, and what can change as we head into this series beginning tonight against the Minnesota Twins, in which we're going to have both pre- and post-game coverage for today, as well as post-game coverage throughout the remainder of the series like we always do here on the WardyNYM platform. And folks, the Mets are going to be making some call-ups in the next 24, 48, 72 hours for, yes, a starting pitcher and potentially an outfielder. We'll get into who exactly those players could be, and ultimately why is Carlos Mendoza even considering the idea of adding guys to this roster. And speaking of adding guys, we have to talk about key updates on the Francisco Alvarez and Jeff McNeil front to see how they're faring there in the farm and their rehab stint, and we're going to further deep dive the farm as there have been some key takeaways, including guys like Matthew Allan, Brandon Sproat, and Nolan McLean, just to name a few on the pitching front, who have definitely turned heads and have definitely looked solid, to say the least, so far there in the minor leagues for their respective teams. So we're going to do a complete farm report. We're going to get into what's going on with Baty and Acuña, who's more deserving of the second base position for the foreseeable future, and wrap things up getting into that Twins preview as we alluded to already. So thank you guys kindly for smashing a like and subscribe on as you first chime in, and letting me know all your initial reactions in the comments down below, everybody. Good, bad, or indifferent. How are you feeling about the Amazons right now with their 10-5 record? I would love to hear it. Folks, the Mets season has officially started, which means it's time to shout out our amazing sponsor here at SeatGeek, because not only are they going to have me covered, but they're going to have each and every one of you covered with all of your ticketing needs throughout the course of the 162. Because it's one thing to be the #1 rated ticketing app with over 28 million downloads and 70,000+ active events to choose from, whether it's Mets games, different team games, whether you're looking at concert tickets, comedy show tickets, anything ticket related, SeatGeek has you covered. And just to give you guys further proof, I have been utilizing SeatGeek well before we actually had them here as a ticketing sponsor. And the best part of it all, everybody, is that they have a grading scale, a true system in their app that's limited on the best in the game, in my humble opinion. As you guys see beside me, we're going to take a look at some future Mets games, specifically against the Philadelphia Phillies right around mid to late April. And as you guys see the ticket prices, you see a range of 1 to 10 on the scale, meaning how good it is for a bang for your buck, and a color coordination scale, meaning if it's green, that you should really definitely get those tickets because it's a great bang for your buck. And if it's red, if it's more in the rating of 1 to 5, they're probably overpriced, and you could probably do better elsewhere, still in the SeatGeek app, but somewhere else when you're looking to acquire tickets in said app. So that's what I love so much about them. They make it so easy, so simplistic to give me a great idea as to what I should be pouncing on, especially when some awesome deals present themselves throughout the course of the 162 there in the SeatGeek app. So what does this mean, everybody? It means that if you haven't already, you got to check out our awesome friends, because they're going to have you covered, again, with Mets tickets or whatever you need ticket-wise throughout the entire course of the year, which is why I implore each and every one of you, if you haven't already, to check out our amazing promo code at WARDY10 by clicking the link down below the description of this video. Shout out to SeatGeek, as always, for being an amazing sponsor on the platform, everybody. But seriously, use WARDY10 as your promo code. Once you click it, it's hyperlinked too, so if you have the app downloaded, it's going to tell you automatically that that percentage was added, and you're going to get some money off your next ticketing purchase, all thanks to our awesome friends here at SeatGeek. Shout out to them once more. We appreciate them greatly. Alrighty, folks, so let's get into our first segment, in which we have a plethora of topics to get into, and it's actually going to be a segment that I just did with the New York Post and Dexter Henry for you guys to check out. Full version is there on the YouTube channel at the New York Post Sports YouTube channel, but I did want to show you guys at least a clip, so here it is.
4 straight series wins for the Mets, Tyler. What do you think has been the biggest key behind this team's turnaround here and sustained success over the last 2 weeks?
You know, crazy enough, when we look at the Mets start to the season, the great expectation was that their offense would help carry them, that the pitching would be a liability. And Lo and behold, it's pretty much the complete opposite, right? Their Mets pitching has carried them every which way for the most part this season, not only on the rotation front, or even guys like Clay Holmes, Griffin Canning, Tyler McGill might not be going beyond five innings or so, but for the most part, they've been rock solid, keeping the Mets in every single ball game. Pair that with a Mets bullpen that's been right towards the top of the list of the best in baseball, outside of teams like the Padres, and that is where they're having their great success. It's certainly on the pitching end, being one of the best overall pitching staffs in baseball throughout the first 2.5 weeks of the season. And pair that then with a Pete Alonso, who still currently leads, if I'm not mistaken, all of the National League at least in OPS or close to. He's torn the cover off the ball to begin the season. And when guys like Juan Soto not really getting in his full swing on the power front, has been still a solid plate setter for guys like Alonso, who's driving them in. Lindor is not forgetting how to bat from the left side for the first month and a half, like what we saw last year. So that's been a key part of the Mets' success with his great homestand that we saw there against the Marlins for the most part. So all in all, yes, we've had offensive output, but it has definitely been carried by this Mets pitching staff so far this season.
No doubt about that.
Shout out to my guy Dexter Henry for having me on. You guys can make sure to check me out there on the New York Post Sports YouTube channel, along with paired in their articles in which the video is linked, just like when you see videos in the SNY segments, among other things, in their articles. Same exact way. You guys can check me out as a reoccurring contributor there, as well as a Bleacher Report host covering MLB-wide topics Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, 5 p.m. sharp there in the Bleacher Report app. But folks, let's get into the first key topic here, and that has everything to do with, yes, Kodai Senga and what works so right for him that we saw in this latest outing against the Athletics, because he casually goes 7 shutty at 79 pitches, just 2 pitches greater than his previous 2 outings where he pitched 77 pitches apiece in his first outing, where he went just north of 5, and then his second outing he went at least 5 innings. And Senga, who's been on this a little bit of a pitch limit, just to the point that the Mets are not going to make sure that he's already getting 100 pitches throughout his first couple outings, but it won't take him long to get there, and that is absolutely the only reason why he didn't go into the 8th inning against the A's. And thankfully, the Mets didn't need him to, as AJ Minter shut down the door and Max Kranick came in and got the job done, just like he has done all season long, which has me very happy as a big Max Kranick guy. If you guys have been following the platform, then you know very well how I feel about Max as a friend of the platform, a good buddy of mine, and to have him now dominating for the Mets the way that he's been. But guys, there has been no one that's dominated on the mound better so far this season than what Kodai Senga just did this past night against the Athletics. Furthermore, let's get into a key breakdown into some details here from Isaac Rothman, our great pitching contributor, who has the following to say on this entire outing from Kodai. The fastball velocity was up, and I made note of that we saw in our post-game coverage. It was up there that we saw topping out basically 98 miles per hour, where, mind you, he was only at topping out 95.7 in 2023. So the velo was up entirely for Senga, which is huge. He actually averaged 2 ticks higher on his fastball in this outing than he has in previous starts this year. And the fact that he had 98 paint there, bottom corner, for his final out of the day in the 7th was an absolute bulldog outing, to say the least, by Kodai Senga. He looked brilliant, and I'm loving every single second of it. But he located really, really well that we saw and was quite effective. And that cutter especially was important because it was probably his most important pitch. He consistently landed a glove side to lefties and held hitters to a .110 XWOBACON, generating tons of soft contact. That's a big reason he got through 7 innings on just 79 pitches, because he was only at 67 pitches through 6. And mind you, Kodai only struck out 4 in this outing, but it really felt like he had 10 punchies, doing his best Clay Holmes impression from a couple days ago, because there was so much swing and miss. There was a lot of bite, and he was a human highlight reel this entire, again, that dotted fastball was so gassed, and the outing, I can't get over that. And the Ghost Fork did its job, as one would hope, as Isaac alludes to here, and 2 straight counts with a 60% whiff rate and a 45% chase rate. I'd still like to see him lean less on the fastball given the shape, and I 100% agree, because he throws a meatball when it's middle. We've seen that in his first outing against Miami this year, and of course there in the NLCS against the Dodgers, sadly. Instead, use the cutter more early to lefties and bring back the sinker to righties like he showed in spring. But the biggest takeaway, the velo is up, absolutely. And I love what we've been seeing with that cutter, especially as Isaac alludes to, against lefties especially, along with the sinker that you're trying to run up and in there, especially on right-handers, and Kodai was just an absolute mastermind. He looked as comfortable, as calm, cool, composed, collected, all the C words that we can figure out as possible. And Senga is one of these guys where if the Mets are going to go anywhere this year, they're going to need to make sure they get length from some key starters. This is something that they've labored with big time to begin the season 2.5 weeks in, with Shamanai and Frankie Montas certainly being missed, as those are two massive innings eaters for this team. When they do get back towards the end of May, early June, that's going to be great for this rotation. But in the meantime, they need our true ace in Kodai Senga to pitch like an ace caliber starter. And folks, he not only gave us that, but then some. So I'm feeling pretty confident about Kodai heading forward to see what he did here against the Athletics. And he shouldn't be slighted that he did this against the Athletics. They have plenty of solid, young, exciting bats in their lineup, and he made them look absolutely silly, including Brent Rooker, who you could argue is the best player currently in that lineup, simply had no clue how to pick up or handle that ghost fork whatsoever throughout the entire course of the game. So Mets fans, I would love to hear for you on a scale 1 to 10. How would you grade Kodai Senga's outing? As I broke down my post-game show, I'm giving him an 8.5 out of 10. That is how good I thought his outing was. And the only reason why I'm not giving him a 9 or a 10 is because I leave that solely for guys that either give us complete game shutties, no-nos, one-hitters, something along those lines that's better than a 7 shutout outing, as impressive as that was for Kodai, who now sits with a just over 1 ERA throughout his first 3 starts of the season. Mets fans, continue to let me know all your thoughts there on the Kodai Senga front, because as we get back to our main slide, I want to talk briefly on the pros and the cons of what's been working and what has been working with the Mets so far this season. Let's start with what has been working throughout their first 15 games, 10-5. And what's been working has been that pitching staff, right? Even for a Mets team that has labor to get the length from their key starters like Clay Holmes, like Griffin Canning, like Tyler McGill, like everyone in your mother feels like not named Kodai Senga. Peterson has given us 2 six-strong outings throughout his first 3 starts, and when I say 6 strong, I mean 6 innings at least. So I've been encouraged by Pearson, all things considered, and Senga just one-upped him with this fantastic outing that we saw. But what has stood out, it's been the pitching, right? The Mets have been either number 1 in team ERA, or they've been towards the top of the list, and that's been for the majority of the year. And the bullpen, it's been even better, with the exception of Edwin Diaz getting rocked that we saw there against the Miami Marlins in the series finale of the homestand, and then the first game that we saw there, the 7-6 victory in Sacramento. This bullpen has been nothing short of absolutely nails, and it's not just guys like Max Kranick, who have been beating that drum all season long, going way back to the beginning of spring training, Huascar Brosban, but it's a guy that should definitely not be underestimated, and a guy that deserves more love. And in my opinion, that's AJ Minter. AJ Minter has just quietly given the Mets some quality outings here that we've seen. And yes, they haven't been all clean in the sense that he's allowed a hit or two to get on sometimes, but he's worked out those jams. And AJ Minter, the lone test that he still has for the Mets this year as a true high leverage lefty option to set up Edwin Diaz or whoever's closing there in the 9th inning, is to pitch on back-to-back days. Outside of that, Minter has been pretty much as advertised. The velocity doesn't seem like an over this big concern that fans had heading into the year, and he's coming off of the same hip surgery that his teammate David Pearson dealt with, and we know how good Pearson's been since arriving back from injury starting in June of 2024. So hopefully AJ Minter can stay healthy, stay strong, and be that absolute dynamo, true 1-2 punch in that bullpen for himself and Edwin there in the setup to close a roll throughout the good chunk of the 162. Mets fans, I want to know on the pitching end, who has stood out the most to you for the right reasons and why, and who has stood out the most for you wrong reason and why? I would love to hear in the comments down below. And as we talk about what has been more negative for the Mets, it has most certainly been the runners in scoring position. Even after a game where they comfortably win 8-0 with some bad fundies by the Athletics towards leading into the 9th inning there that we saw, it doesn't change the fact that the Mets were still leaving north of 10 on base. They left 11 on base. I believe they were 3 for 12 or somewhere along those lines with runners in scoring position. The Mets, until Luis Torrens drove in the first run of the ball game in the 6th inning, if I'm not mistaken, the Mets were 0 for 27 in their previous opportunities with runners in scoring position. So yes, guys like Brandon Nimmo, we saw have himself a strong series with a couple home runs, a gapper, getting on base, all those kind of things. But Nimmo and Vientos in particular, in which Mark was productive too, that we saw ripping a gapper for an RBI, having an RBI walk. Brett Baty, that we'll talk about shortly, was offensively productive too, which is a huge sign in the right direction. Hopefully it's not just that, a flash in the pan, and it's gone forever for the next week. But the point here is that when you look at how this Mets offense is constructed right now, they're going to need those 4 and 5 spots to step up big time throughout the course of the year, because you're going to have endless plate setters between Lindor, Soto, who yes, he isn't hitting playing for too much power right now, but he's still getting on base at a very strong clip. We know the power is going to come. Anyone that's second guessing Soto's abilities either hasn't watched him throughout his career or is just that too in the thick of it as a fan right now that they truly believe that they are actually spending $765 million themselves as if they are Steve Cohen. Otherwise, there's really nothing to justify going out of your way to talk down on Soto because you're the same fans that still somehow, some way talk down on Francisco Lindor even after being an MVP caliber player for the Mets last year. But I digress. Let's reel back in here because the reality is that even with Soto and Lindor not necessarily playing on all full cylinders right now, and Alonso was pretty much up until we saw after the first game of the series, but Alonso's been amazing. He's due to have some offers. It's going to happen. He's going to go through the ebbs and flows. But this is what I mean when I talk about Brandon Nimmo and Vientos flip-flopping at the 4 and 5 spot. You need to make sure you have protection there when you're batting cleanup and then batting fifth. And the Mets have had endless opportunities every single game with guys on. So you can't say that the Mets don't have offensive upside. They do. We have already seen the potential with this lineup and how many times they can get on base consistently. But what has been a commonality and similarity at the beginning of last year, they aren't able to drive them in with runners in scoring position. So bad that the Mets entered their series against the Minnesota Twins as having the bottom feeder last batting average in all the National League with runners on base. So in scoring position specifically. Mets with runners in scoring position and 2 outs, they're even worse. They're batting below 100. So a lot more work to do, and that's something that I hope that we see more of in the Minnesota Twins series, but we'll talk about that more as we get to wrapping up and the conclusion of this video, folks, because now I want to have a brief discussion before we talk about potential call-ups, prospect reports, and all those kind of things, is Brett Baty and Luis Angel Acuña, because we just saw Acuña have himself a really sharp game for the Mets. We saw him get on base. We saw him get on base there with the fielder's choice with the bunt. He scored all the way from first thanks to Lindor ripping an opposite field gapper for an RBI. He also hit a single that we saw towards the end of the game there, I believe in the 9th inning or so. So Acuña, who got the start at second base, while Baty got the start at third, the rare start at third in his normal position for Baty, while Vientos got the start at DH. Could we see more of this until McNeil returns from injury potentially at second base? It wouldn't shock me because it did work to a degree. And while I definitely have my reservations with Baty and his playing time, and even after seeing him rip a triple where he absolutely barreled it well, clearly made contact that he was able to drive and lift the baseball. A huge step for him because he's done very little of that so far this season at the major league level. Even with the confidence I'm sure is getting slightly instilled with Baty, a nice flight there from Sacramento and Minnesota after 8-0 win, there is no denying that Luis Angel Acuña should still be the guy getting the consistent reps at second base. So whether that means giving Baty more playing time at the hot corner and giving Vientos more time at DH while suppressing the playing time of guys like Winker and Marte, or if you go down the alternative route, which is you have Vientos back at third, have Acuña at second, you bring in Baty later in the game if you really need him to, or for specific matchups, okay. But my gripe here is that I personally have a problem if you are going to continue to full-on platoon Baty and Acuña based on matchups when I truly feel that Acuña has proved well enough already to warrant being in there pretty much daily. Because even when he isn't hitting on all full cylinders, he is an absolute lightning rod defensively. We know how good he is at second base. We also know how elite of a base runner he is, the 98th percentile and outs, pardon me, not outs above average, even though he's been good defensively. It's in the sprint speed. So to give you an idea just how good he has been speed-wise, he has been towards the top, the best in the game, just like a guy in Jose Siri that we're going to talk about in a second. So simply put, everybody, I fully expect the Mets to roll with one, if not both of them, in a platoon. But leading up to McNeil's return over the next week and a half or so, I got to be honest, Acuña looks like the guy that's more deserving to be there. And it's a damn shame, in my opinion, if we see Acuña have a strong day and then he rides the bench the next. That's what happened that we saw in Game 2 of this series after what he did in Game 1 against the A's. I just couldn't fathom it. It didn't make any sense to me. And that is a great example of what I do not like about the flip-flopping platoon that you have either at DH or at second base. It comes back to bite when you have guys competing for a position, but even guys that are clearly outplaying the other yet are still viewed on the same even playing field as said other player. In this case, is Brett Baty. So for Baty, I hope that the confidence is instilled after a strong series finale in Sacramento. But most importantly, I just want to see one of these guys really be given consistent reps here, knowing that McNeil will be returning in the next week or so. And before we talk more on Jeff McNeil, everybody, let's actually hear some words from Carlos Mendoza as to how he's feeling about the team and what we could expect there on the roster over the next day or two. So let's see what he had to say.
Manny, we saw Siri on crutches walking out of here yesterday. What's his status update right now?
Yeah, he's in pain. You know, he walked in this morning and still in crutches. You know, he's like I said, he's pretty sore, not able to put weight on it. He's getting treatment right now and see what we got, but he's in pain.
Do you think there's a chance this could be an IL thing?
It could be. You know, I think we will have to have a conversation after the game and then maybe tomorrow. But with the way he's feeling right now, I could see this a potential IL. Unless he turns the corner here pretty soon.
Turns a
I
wasn't gonna ask.
Yeah, we're talking about inserting a potential 6-star. Looks like it's more against the Cardinals series here.
Where are you at as far as a 6-starter?
So given the fact that the Mets play a lot of games where there's no days off, not just starting now, but what was starting going back to the beginning of the A's series, is that the Mets are going to need an extra arm, and they're fully expected to call up a 6-starter in the coming days. And we're going to expand as to who that player can be, along with what is going on with Jose Siri. So let's actually start with Jose, because one thing that can't be missed in this is that Siri is still clearly in pain. He was in crutches that we saw the series finale between the A's and the Mets, and because of that, there is an expectation that he may hit the injured list, which will warrant the Mets to make a roster move. Now, should Siri hit the injured list, but that'll be retroactive to when he first was injured a couple days ago, so it won't technically be those full 15 days at least. Even with that being said, you're going to have to replace him. And someone in my post-game show asked me, Wardy, what's your thoughts on the Mets rolling with Acuña and Baty still on the roster if they are going to put themselves in position where Siri's on the IL and they don't allocate that for, say, an outfielder? I'm like, anything's possible, but it's hard to envision the Mets putting Siri on the IL and not doing a corresponding move that makes sense to fit the immediate need, which will be a backup outfield option. And that's where we all miss Alexander Canario, because he's doing great things now with the Pittsburgh Pirates, just having hit his first home run of the season just 48 to 72 hours ago. So definitely missing Canario, and it definitely stains, and this is what we feared when it came to having a platoon of Taylor and Siri, where there's a pretty low floor. The upside's solid, but the floor is pretty low, and that wasn't even including what's going to happen on the injury front. So Siri, we know he's always laying it out there, and funny enough, he's hurt because of his shin, probably dealing with a bad bone bruise right now, I'm sure, just a contusion, whatever they're calling it there with his shin, because he drilled himself the other day there on a foul ball, which did not look pretty. So knowing Jose Siri is probably more than likely going to be placed on the injured list unless we hear things that suggest otherwise, and if we do, we'll discuss it further in content later on today in a pregame and our postgame segment. Everything is aligning for the Mets to call up Jose Azocar. Yes, do not expect the Mets to be jumping at the gun to call up Jet Williams or Drew Gilbert, who's still working is still in Port St. Lucie for his rehab, basically, that we're going to talk about in just the next couple minutes in our deep dive of prospect report. Right now, it's looking like the stars are aligning for Jose Azocar to be that guy. And it makes a lot of sense given the fact that Azocar has MLB experience, had a great spring training, and is fast as all heck and can play good, solid defense for you in the outfield. That's where he separates himself from Billy McKinney, former Mets legend from a couple years ago that's back in the Mets farm, who's more of a predominant corner outfielder type guy. When we also look at John Singleton, who they brought in, he's more of a standard DH than anything else, not an outfielder at all. DJ Stewart looks like a Gold Glove in comparison. That's saying a lot. But Jose Azocar, who's had his stint, his cup of coffee in the major leagues with the Padres a couple years ago, has had success, is a speed demon on the bags as well, and again, can just play quality defense for you. So between Azocar's very impressive spring training and what has been an underwhelming start to the year in the minor leagues, he's only batting like 222 with a 700 OPS, but still the first week and a half, 2 weeks of the season, so I will give him the pass there. Azocar will just be an immediate need there on the defensive front, which would mean that Tyrone Taylor would get the bulk of center field playing time, because I don't foresee a world where Brandon Nimmo gets shifted to center much at all this year. If it does happen, I think it'll be very few and far in between to maximize offensive output if you're going to have, say, Jesse Winker in left, Marte at DH, if Vientos is going to be there at the hot corner. So all I'm telling you guys is don't be surprised should Jose Siri go down on the injured list that the inevitable call-up on the offensive end would more than likely be the best true outfielder fit, and there's no one that checks off a better box for the Mets right now for an immediate team defensive fit than Jose Azocar there in center field to platoon some time with Tyrone Taylor. But now let's get on to not just Jose Azocar, but let's talk about who the Mets' next 6 starter is going to be, because we've heard fans get very giddy already thinking it's going to be our guy in Brandon Sproat, Mets top pitching prospect, maybe Blake Tidwell to a degree. Well, I'm here to give you a smack of reality, and sadly, I got to do my best Andy Martino impression, which means I got to throw cold water on anything positive that you guys are hoping for on the top prospects to be called up front. As much as I hope and pray that we see a guy like Brandon Sproat, Nolan McLean, that we're going to get into just in the next couple minutes here, so excited to break them down because they will inevitably be impacting the Mets, maybe as soon as this year in the case of Sproat especially. But the reality is that the Mets are not loving the idea of just rushing up a kid for one start. That's not what they want to do. They want to bring up someone that's really going to be innings eater more than anything, which is why you can expect one of Justin Hageman or Jose Urena. Now let's get into them both. Jose Urena, the Mets signed late into spring that we saw, signed with them after having a sub-3 ERA in 64 2/3 innings with the Texas Rangers as a reliever last year. As a full swingman starter, he was solid, but definitely a guy that you want more in a multi-inning reliever role. And I think if he even got the start for the Mets, it would be more of a bullpen game where Urena gives you anywhere from 2 to 4 innings, and then you go to the pen and just try to get the work done heavily throughout that day. Is if it's Urena or Hageman, that's likely what the outcome is going to be. Justin Hageman, who the Mets signed over this past offseason or so, they're stretching him out as a starter for the first time in his professional career, and he has not really had too much success that we have seen in Syracuse throughout his first 2 or 3 outings or so. He's been fairly underwhelming, to say the least. So I don't expect anything crazy when it comes to who this call-up will be specifically for the pitching end, and if it is somehow, some way, one of our top prospects, we'll do a breaking news video or a live show to break it down right away and tell you how excited I am about it. But the Mets are playing the long game with their pitching prospects, understandably so. They don't want to hurt the development, and they certainly want to make sure that when they are called up, that they're hopefully here to stay and not this thing where they have to toy with the idea of sending them back down after a couple of weeks, the way that the Mets toyed for a bit with Christian Scott last year. Then they did for innings reasons, and then before we knew it, his elbow was a ticking time bomb still, as he had a partially torn UCL and then had reconstructive surgery, which ended his year. So Mets fans, I want to hear from you. Who do you expect to be that 6-man starter for the Mets in this series beginning against the Cardinals? My money is on one of Justin Hageman or Jose Urena until proven otherwise, because that's been what the common consensus has been. But you guys can let me know down below if you feel any different. But folks, now let's get into something that I'm very excited to break down, and that is our prospect report. And I've been enjoying these thoroughly more and more in these Big Mets update segments because they're really helping me stay locked in with the Mets prospects on a nightly basis. And this is something that transparently I've struggled with in the past because I am not a huge prospect guru. I won't necessarily go out of my way to deep dive guys, but now I'm more incentivized than ever, and there's a lot of guys performing well that should have us excited, to say the least, here in the farm. So let's go ahead and take a look at what is happening in the farm, everybody. And let's start with our guy here that, yes, we're going to begin with Matthew Allan because, guys, Matt Allan is here. Oh, baby, is Matthew Allan here. Take a look at this, everybody. 3.2 innings, 47 pitches, 0 earned runs, 3 Ks, 2 hits, 0 walks. Matt Allan has yet to allow an earned run in multiple outings so far this year, and he's looking better with each passing second. This is the same Matthew Allan that the Mets drafted in 2019 with that huge heavy slot bonus, and he hasn't pitched professional ball until this season because of Tommy John surgery, nerval issues from Tommy John surgery, and then being completely reset and set back the past couple of years. Allan is finally healthy. The velo is sitting 94 and touching 97, 98 there on the heater. The cutter was looking great too. 88 to 91 is what we saw. So I don't think we're going to see Allan in Port St. Lucie lawn this year. And mind you, the Mets have no rush or true immediate expectation for Allan. They just want to see him healthy. That's what David Stern said. He just wants to see him go out there, pitch, eat those innings, and be the guy that hopefully he can be in his respective career. But to see Matt Allan go out there and comfortably carve up these batters the way that he's doing, not allowing any earned runs yet, I don't think it's going to be long before we see Allan get the call up there to Brooklyn Cyclones and work his way up from there. My bold prediction with Matt Allan is that by the end of this season, he will be either looking fantastic in Brooklyn or he will get a sliver of a taste with the Rumble Ponies by the time the year is done. I think he's going to make a 3-league jump from going from low A to high A to all the way to double A by the time the year's end. And no, this is not to put any pressure on him, but just my confidence in him from what we're getting early should the results hopefully start to transition a bit when he inevitably gets moved up, hopefully throughout the course of the 162 this year in the minor leagues. But Matt Allan, what a story he has been, and I'm so happy to just see this man healthy, and I know that you guys are too. And going from Matt Allan, let's now get into the Mets' top pitching prospect, that being in the Mr. Sproat GOAT himself, and Brandon Sproat. Because Brandon, we know, has fluctuated with his not offensive output, his pitching output there at the minor league level. And as you guys will see here from the clips right now, he's still been looking good. Sproat in his latest outing, of course he was right in my backyard the one day that I'm out of town this past weekend because I was in D.C. for a comedy show, and I'm right there in Lehigh Valley, and we saw Brandon Sproat carving up batters there against the Iron Pigs. So next time they're in town, I definitely got to make sure that I am chiming in. But Sproat here, 4.1 innings, 75 pitches, 1 earned run, 6 strikeouts, 2 hits, 2 walks. Our guy was an absolute dog and was more as advertised. And if you exclude Sproat's first outing of the year where he just had nothing working, it was a cold, frigid night. We also saw the velo was down. Now we are seeing him touch back 98 plus on the gun. Sliders looking solid. You're getting more of the Brandon Sproat that you're hoping to get there at the major league level. And what was a solid outing for him against the Philadelphia Phillies AAA affiliate. And I believe that he's striking out Oscar Mercado there, that he caught him looking. You love to see that. Remember Mercado? If I'm not mistaken, that was him from Cleveland all those years ago. But Brandon Sproat, everybody, I want to hear on a scale of 1 to 10, how excited are you to have Sproat in this Mets rotation at some point this season? And are you one of those more progressive fans and not as conservative in the sense that you really want Sproat up ASAP? So even if that means as soon as the series against the Cardinals to be that true standout that we're going to see, so be it. And I also apologize, folks, when I say that series for the Cardinals. That isn't the next series for the Mets. That is their matchup after the Twins. So if I didn't say that earlier, I would like to correct myself, and apologies in advance for that. But Brandon Sproat, he's been looking absolutely nails, so I'm pumped up to say the least. And hopefully, if he can continue this over this next couple outings, it will not be long before the Mets do inevitably give him the call, and hopefully something that they can look back on and say, yeah, there's not a chance in absolute heck that we're sending this man back down. He's here to stay, and he's here to be one of our next key pieces in the rotation for the years to come. And when we talk about key pieces in the rotation for years to come, we can't talk about Brandon Sproat without talking about Nolan McLean, because Nolan McLean's an absolute dog as well. And McLean not only has the nastiest sweeper in what feels like the entire Mets organization, especially considering that Ottavino is no longer part of the squad, just the bite on this guy's slider is just silly. I mean, McLean, another sharp outing here, everybody, that we're seeing. Look at this, 5 innings, 81 pitches, 1 earned run, 6 strikeouts, 4 hits, 3 walks, doing all the damage with the Binghamton Rumble Ponies. This is a guy that I do not think is going to be long before he gets the call. McLean is expected per his MLB Pipeline ETA to impact the Mets as soon as this year, and he does have major league quality stuff. The swing and miss is disgusting with McLean. Has solid velocity, but it's that sweeper. It's just such a difference maker. Heading into this year through the grades that we saw through Pipeline among others, graded out with the best sweeper slider we saw, Nolan McLean. We also saw Jonathan grade really well in other areas, as did Sproat. But McLean is a guy that I feel like hasn't been really talked about as much because we saw Jonathan and Sproat especially skyrocket in the minor leagues last year, while McLean was comfortably and casually doing his thing and having a really good season. So this is just a start of us kind of really talking about Nolan McLean on a every single week level. We started over the past week and a half, going back to spring training even, so a month plus ago. But he's going to be a reoccurring segment because it really does feel like it will not be long before he not only gets to the bigs, but actually finds himself as a difference maker. The confidence that McLean carries himself, in my opinion, trumps and supersedes that of Brandon Sproat and obviously Matt Allan, but Allan gets the pass because he's just starting his professional career right now this year. But even like Jonathan, as exciting as Ton is, I think McLean might have the best MLB-wide makeup when it comes to getting to the bigs and making an immediate impact. Whereas Sproat, I think, has the highest upside and ceiling, but also may have some greater hiccups in the process of getting acclimated as a true major league starter. Mets fans, let me know between McLean, Sproat, Allan, Ton, Tidwell, and all the other Mets prospects on the pitching end that we could possibly think of. Let me know who you are most optimistic with and most pessimistic about and why. And we greatly appreciate you guys doing exactly that. But now, folks, let's get back onto our main slide here and let's get into some other key prospect updates because they weren't the only standouts. We saw Drew Gilbert just over this past day continue to look great in St. Lucie. He ripped himself an RBI double there that we saw. He's been tearing the cover off the ball in St. Lucie, which pairs with Alvarez and McNeil because he's been playing with them in rehab in St. Lucie the past couple of days. So that's been great. We also saw a couple of days ago Eli Serrano III. This kid has come out of nowhere this year. not only is he batting so well that he's been getting on base pretty much every other at bat right now. That's how good he's looked. He's like, what, 15 for 30 or close to and getting on base so far this season. He's not only hitting nukes and hitting for ridiculous contact and power, but he's also robbing bombs. Look at this. Look at this tremendous catch in left field. I know that it probably wasn't great to see on the highlight there. This is what we got to do when we only have Brooklyn Cyclones highlights to deal with. But one more time, just look at him going all the way to the warning track and making that gorgeous catch on the wall. What a catch. Again, full sprint, not a problem. Eli Serrano III is going to be a problem in the best way possible for this Mets team. But let's now talk more on the prospects. Then we're going to briefly preview the Twin Series, and then your guy's going to get out of here, and that be that, baby. So let's go ahead and do this. Going to have that running in the meantime. As we're breaking down the prospects, folks, let's start top down this time. We're going to begin in Syracuse, and we're going to go over their past 2 games because on April 12th, the Syracuse Mets 162 against the Iron Pigs, and it standouts for Brandon Sproat, Sean Reed-Foley giving up 1 earned run in 1 inning. We saw Danil Nunez walk 3 but strike out 1 in a scoreless inning there. We saw Hansis Cabrera finally have a good outing, 2 shutty. I love that. Cabrera's lefty option the Mets could consider some point this year. Pitched roughly 70 innings for the Blue Jays last year and was solid. Not great with the K to walk ratio, but still a solid lefty option that I personally think has higher upside than Danny Young, but we'll see if that holds true. Ty Adcock pitched a scoreless inning 2, which was great. Nico Goodrum hit his first home run in the Mets organization. Former top prospect from like a decade ago is now in the Mets farm. We saw Joey Meneses with a double. He's been looking amazing so far this year. Meneses has literally had like more extra bases than anyone else in AAA, feels like, and I don't think that's a stretch. Azakar had himself a hit in this first matchup too. Meneses with 2 with 3 RBIs. Donovan Walton, that we know who's competing for a spot initially, 2 for 4 with an RBI as well. That's pretty much all she wrote there in that first game. In the second game that we saw this past day, the Syracuse Mets took a page out of the playbook of the New York Mets by winning 7-0 in their Lehigh in their battle against the Iron Pigs here again, because we saw offensively a lot of guys were hitting. We saw Luke Ritter rip a double. We saw Singleton rip a double. We saw Castillo rip a double. And that was really good. Just Singleton, Ritter, and Castillo. On the RBI front, Joey Meneses had 2. He's already got 9 on the season. Singleton, Ritter, Walton all took part. And they were just like the Mets, where even though they won 7-0, when the Mets won 8-0 in their athletics game, they still were 4 for 14 with runners in scoring position, and they left 5 on base. When we look at the offense, Jose Azcar 2 for 3 with 3 runs scored. John Singleton 2 for 4 with the RBI that we said. Joey Meneses 3-hit game. What a dog he's been so far in the year in the minor leagues. And then we look on the pitching end. Waddell went 5 shutty with 2 walks, 4 strikeouts, 1 hit, no earned run, a 1.35 ERA to begin the year. Nice. Love to see that. Anthony Gose, 0.2 scoreless innings, 2 walks, 2 Ks, and a hit. Tyler Zuber, 1.1 shutty. Why? Because he's an absolute dog. And if you guys follow Zuber on X, he calls every Mets player a dog when they do well. So he deserves the kudos and credit for being called one for a change. He's been looking great so far, and he will be called up by the Mets at some point this year with his 1.59 ERA to begin the season as a reliever. But now let's go on to the Rummel Ponies, because the Rummel Ponies in their April 13th game that we saw here, let's see, did the Rummel Ponies play 1 or 2 games? They had a doubleheader that we saw this past day that we're going to break down because they had respective rainouts. Offensively, we saw not too much in this game as they won 2-1 in their first game against the Yard Goats. Wyatt Young had himself a solo shot, which is awesome. Young was great last year in the minor leagues and is looking solid so far this year, batting 9th because he's a plate setter. If he's not going to be first, he's got to be batting 9th with 333 average and over 1,000 OPS. Alex Ramirez got a hit. Kevin Parada got hit, which is good to see in a walk. Outside that, Ryan Clifford, Ofer, don't love that. Nick Morabito, 1 for 4, my guy. McLean went 5 strong innings. And we saw Joander Suarez, if I'm not mistaken, go 4 innings here of 6 strikeout ball. And I'm going to double check to make sure if this is Joander. And it is. That's impressive because Joander was actually exposed by the Mets in the Rule 5 draft, which surprised me because he looked pretty sharp last year in the minor leagues. But to go 4 shutty, 2 hits allowed, no earned runs, no walks, just 6 strikeouts. Yeah, he was in his groove to say the least. Fantastic guy for him. Then the Romo Ponies won their other game 10-1, a curb stomping of the Yard Goats. And on the offensive end, we saw Jordan rip a home run. We saw Williams batting leadoff there at DH rip a home run as well. Nick Morabito had a multi-day with 2 RBIs. Williams had 3 RBIs that we saw. Ryan Clifford caught a pair of walks, didn't record a hit, so he's still struggling there. Kevin Parada, 2 for 4. with an RBI. Swaggerty 2 for 4 with an RBI. Jordan with that home run, 3 RBIs, and that's all she wrote. Pitching-wise, Jack Weniger did it again. This son of a gun can't be stopped. I'm convinced that he can't be stopped as long as this is the exact same thing that I meant to talk about, because this looks a lot like his last final line, Weniger. I feel like I talked about this the other day, so maybe I have this confused, but if I do, I apologize. Either way, Weniger, 5 innings of 2 hit, 1 earned run, 1 walk, 9 strikeout ball, a .9 ERA to begin the season. He has been absolutely nails this year. Shook looked great too, but I feel like this is deja vu, and I feel like I talked about that less than a week ago. If that's the case, then that means that I'm relaying stats that aren't accurate in the sense to the date. So I apologize if that's the case. But now let's get on to the Brooklyn Cyclones, because they've had some games rain down. And as we go back, and I actually think I answered my own question, because the Cyclones had the doubleheader, but maybe the Rumble Ponies didn't. So I could have been wrong on what I just said. Regardless, Jack Weniger, he's an exciting pitching prospect to pay attention to for the Mets this year. Now let's look at the Brooklyn Cyclones, because on April 12th, they lost 2-0. Boston Barrow had a hit in leadoff. Reimer at third had a pair of hits, and that's pretty much all she wrote offensively for the Mets. Diaz got the start and won 4 shutty with 3 hits, 5 strikeouts, and 1 walk. And Gerton, who came in as a reliever after, did allow 1 earned run, 3 hits, 3 walks, 4 strikeouts across 3 innings. So pitching wasn't the problem there, but it was a lackadaisical offense. And we look at their other game here, that would be the Cyclones' 8-1 victory, and we would see Boston Barrow with another hit, which I love. Suero with a home run, his 3rd of the year. Carson Bench, 2 for 4 with a couple runs scored, a .278 average and an .813 OPS. Love that for him. Suero's looked great with a basically .350 average and over 1,000 OPS. And then we look at Hernandez at first base, won 1 for 3 with 3 RBIs. Pitching-wise, Gordon won 3.1 shutty, and then the bullpen shut it down from there. And then we look at Brooklyn Cyclones for this other game. Let me make sure that I have this accurate. I believe that I do. Eli Serrano, baby, the third, still batting right around 300 with 1,000 OPS so far this season there, commanding center field. We saw Thornton go 5 shutty, 6 strikeouts. Lambert was nails in 1.1. He did allow 1 earned run, but 3 strikeouts is what I care about. Lambert throws absolute gas. Not a top pick, but an exciting prospect that the Mets acquired over the past year or so via the draft. He gets all the way to 102, 103, 104 on the gun. He's nasty. Now as we get to the Port St. Lucie Mets here, they lost 2-1 in one of their games here that we're breaking down. Jeff McNeil, however, on the rehab front is where we're going to break down he and how Alvarez performed, because Jeff had himself a hit. Both him and Alvarez got on base in their latest rehab game. Alvarez got on via walk. He went 0 for 4. McNeil was leading off at second base and went 1 for 3 with a pair of strikeouts. Will not be long, as both these guys can be called up for the Mets in the next week and a half or so. Outside of that, we saw Drew Gilbert with a big day, 2 for 4 with a nice RBI double. We saw Jesus Baez with a couple hits, which is great because he tears a cover off the ball, one of the hardest hitters in the Mets minor leagues, which I love to see. And pitching wise, nothing that I really feel the need to break down there. So let's get into the other matchup. And they won 10-3 on April 12th in this one. And Marco Vargas had a great game, leading off at shortstop, 2 for 4 with 3 runs scored, including a double, his 2nd of the year. Home runs were by Ewing, his 1st of the season there at center field, 3 for 5 with 3 RBIs. And Gutierrez at catcher has continued to look great, batting almost 400 with a north of 800 OPS. The Venezuelan catching prospect, 2 for 4 with 2 runs scored and an RBI. Matt Allan looked like a dog. We saw Austin come in and go 4 innings of 1 earned run ball, 5 walks, but 3 strikeouts. And that about does it, folks, for our prospect report. So now, before we wrap this one up, let's do a complete brief deep dive on the Mets' upcoming matchup against, yes, the Minnesota Twins. And then I'll get out of here because we're already past the 40-minute mark unintentionally. So apologies in advance for that, everybody. But we got a lot to talk about in a short period of time to do so, so I appreciate your patience. Clay Holmes is matching up here against Joe Ryan in Game 1 of the series. This is going to be a tough pitching matchup against Minnesota, as they have some dogs. They really do. Then we see Game 2. It's going to be Tyler McGill versus Bailey Ober, who has not been off to a good start this year, but all it takes is a game against the Mets that can't hit with runners in scoring position to get you right. And then for Game 3, we had David Festa, who's getting the start here against Griffin Canning. Canning, yet again, having a start there against an American League team. It's like he's only allowed as a former Angel. But My simple response to this when we're playing the Minnesota Twins is as follows, everybody. Minnesota's 5-11 to start the year. What is their big bugaboo? It's not only consistency in the rotation depth, but it's also the consistency in the offense. Carlos Correa, Byron Buxton, Royce Lewis. What do these three-headed monster have in common? They're all unbelievably injury-prone, and the Twins will go as far or as short as those players lead them to be. Buxton is a human highlight reel. If you guys have followed the platform over the years, he's one of my favorite players in the league, not on the Mets. I expect a good series from him if he's healthy. In the case of Correa, Royce, it's the same thing. These guys just need to be healthy, and they're great, but they've been so in and out of the lineup that you really look at the vulnerability of this Minnesota Twins team, and you say to yourself, this should be another comfortable 5th straight series victory for the club. And it's as simple as that. The Mets aren't even facing guys like Pablo Lopez in the rotation. And while Lopez has gotten rocked by the Mets in years past, it wouldn't shock me if he had success in Minnesota against our Mets in this matchup. So I like this matchup quite a bit for the Mets, but what I don't like is them in Minnesota, where weather won't be on your side completely, 1, and 2, the runner and scoring position woes have been as significant as they've been. So that is a big thing that I'm looking for in this 3-game set, is to just see the boys start to hit with guys on base. I want to see Juan Soto start to do more Juan Soto things outside of getting his walks like he does every single game. That's what I'm looking for most as a fan. I would love to hear from you guys. What do you think are going to be the keys to success for the Mets in their latest matchup against the Twins? We will have pregame coverage for you guys live right around 6 p.m. Eastern, barring changes here later on today at the time of us recording this for April 14th, and we'll have post-game coverage after every single game throughout the series like we always do. Thank you guys again for watching. Let me know all your thoughts in the comments down below. And as always, no matter what, let's go Mets. Peace out, everybody. Have a great one.